Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode 8, the season finale of season 2 of the U.S. History GCast as presented by Gibsonian Institute. Today we're going to be looking at Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ, and the Vietnam War. All right, so let's get into right into it here. We're going to begin with Vice President Lyndon Johnson getting the oath of office on Air Force One. All right, so as we left off with the assassination of JFK, you see next to Lyndon Johnson to his left is Jackie Kennedy, still wearing that same dress that we talked about in the last episode, where her husband was assassinated next to her in. All right, so the country mourns the loss of President Kennedy. However, Lyndon takes over, and we're going to look at what he does domestically, of course, and then foreign policy-wise. All right, so let's start first at what he's going to do within the United States. So to come up with what is known as the Great Society. And this is a really good picture because this is what Lyndon Johnson should be known for. Primarily, he gets a lot of connections with the Vietnam War. However, he is also going to be the person that passes civil rights. So behind him, you see Martin Luther King Jr. in this monumental moment. So the Great Society is the name for LBJ's domestic programs. He has this grand idea that he's going to create the Great Society, and our American society is going to be. We're in this golden age, in this time period after World War II, and we have an opportunity to not only grow power-wise, but also we can kind of show this is how great democracy can be. So he wants to do this starting with things at home have to be awesome. All right. So he's going to declare, this is where we start to get the phrase war on poverty. All right, he's going to pass the Economic Opportunity Act in 1964, and that's going to provide $1 billion in aid to various anti-poverty programs. So he's directly attacking this. Let's move on to the key programs here. He's going to get a lot. All right, so Lyndon Johnson is known as a great legislator. He's a guy that gets a lot of laws passed, and the reason that he's able to do this is because of how much time he spends as a member of the House and Senate before becoming vice president and president, respectively. All right. So he first comes into office under FDR, and he is able to quickly kind of figure out how the process works and how to make it work for him. So he understands how the machine works, and he kind of grinds out laws left and right. So he's going to pass Medicare, health insurance for Americans age 65 and over. That's still around today. All right. 58.5 million people in 2017 are benefits of Medicare. All right, so that's something that comes from the Great Society. Medicaid, also still around today. That's health insurance for people that cannot afford to pay for all or some of their own insurance. All right, so definitely a beneficial thing as well. 72.3 million people benefit from that today. All right, so just looking at these numbers, he's just in total, he's already affected 130 million people. So the Great Society is far-reaching, and it does make a difference. He's also going to have housing and urban development. He's going to create low-cost housing for people. 500,000 today affected by this. The Higher Education Act is going to offer loans and scholarships for college students. After the Great Society kind of comes in with these plans, school is going to be really affordable for a time, specifically the 70s, 80s, in the time period right around here in the 60s and 70s, I want to say, more specifically, where school, you hear about people being able to work a job and go to school at the same time and not have any loans and anything like that. So this is going to be a big reason why. All right, so that's just a number right off there. Air and Water Quality Act. This is kind of the first things we start to hear about the environment and EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. But also the Civil Rights Act, of course. All right, so he passes in 1964, segregation in public places is illegal. No more Jim Crow laws. Completely gets rid of that. Then also 1965, the Voting Rights Act. There's no more literacy tests. There is nothing. It is illegal to try to discriminate people in any fashion from their ability to vote. So the way that this was happening, you can't discriminate skin color, gender, academic ability, nothing. If people are registered voters, they can vote. All right, and that's thanks to Lyndon Johnson here. And that's what that picture with MLK was showing. Now, halftime. We're gonna take a quick break here, and then we'll come back to the Vietnam War. I just want you to just go real quick. There's just going to be a couple short questions about the Great Society because it is so monumental, and it kind of gets overshadowed by Vietnam. All right, so moving on now. Get that done. We'll move on to Vietnam. All right, here we go. Vietnam, the context behind Vietnam. In the 1800s, the French are going to seize control of the country, and they're going to control Vietnam for over 100 years. 1945, after World War II, Japanese are defeated. The Vietnamese see an opportunity for independence. They see that the world's kind of in turmoil. There's an opportunity. It's time to seize this opportunity. So revolution will break out. Ho Chi Minh is going to be the leader of the communist revolt to overthrow the French rule, and it's going to take a while. It's going to take about 8 or 9 years. But the United States, again, remember with the policy of containment, is going to support the French side because they want to, one, stop communism, but also we've been allied with the French a lot of times in history, so they're kind of pals of us. So we're going to stick with them and kind of support them. In 1954, so 9 years, after a 56-day battle, the French are going to surrender, which gives the Vietnamese independence. All right, so what does this mean after that? There's a little bit to clean up. Well, first, Vietnam is going to be divided into two nations. The north is going to be led by Minh, and the south is to be led by Ngo Diem. All right, so we're going to have a similar context with the Korean War. So moving on, the outbreak of civil war. Part of the plan of splitting Vietnam in half was eventually to reunify the nation, and that's set for 1959 with elections. However, Diem is going to block the election. It's unlikely. A lot of people in Vietnam at this time were looking for communism to spread. It wasn't some cancer that was infecting them. They were looking for it. All right, so it looks like he's not going to win, so he blocks the election. The Viet Cong, important people in this battle, are going to begin guerrilla attacks in the south, and guerrilla warfare, guerrilla attacks are going to be kind of quick hit and run. It's something that we've used to describe the tactics that the Americans used in the Revolutionary War, where they're kind of jumping, they're using the trees and the surrounding environment to their advantage. That's going to be extremely prevalent in the way that the Viet Cong fights. So the Viet Cong, to be certain here, to be completely clear, the Viet Cong are members in the South that would like to join the North, and they're going to be like a group that's going to kind of subvert or work to overthrow the sovereign government with the aid of the Northern Vietnamese army. All right, so Diem is slowly going to lose support for his government, which eventually the United States sees this and they say, "Oh, this isn't good, so we're getting out of here." So the U.S. pulls support, and after that, the Southern Vietnamese Army, or SVA as I'll call them, leaders stage a military coup, and out goes Diem. This leads us now to the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which is a big turning point for U.S. involvement and then the subsequent resolution. In August 1964, reports of North Vietnamese torpedoes striking American destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin are reported to the president. You can see those two there on the map. The Maddox attacked twice, reportedly, and then the Turner Joy. In response, Johnson orders airstrikes in retaliation. All right, he's not going to let Americans be attacked on the high seas. And this will lead to the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which I will read now. Congress approves and supports the determination of the president to take all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against the forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression. That is the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, or that's a specific excerpt from the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Now, keep in mind here, this isn't a declaration of war. However, it basically gives Lyndon Johnson the opportunity or the ability to do whatever he's got to do to fight this war. So we're in a state of war without declaring war, and Lyndon Johnson has this kind of unlimited power. Now, getting into the actual fighting, in the early stages, U.S. troops are going to give a lot of help to SVA. They're not very organized, and the U.S. troops are able to start to organize them, train them, and we have vastly superior technology, obviously, at this time. So we see very good immediate results. However, once the fighting stops being open battles on the field, and we move to jungle fighting, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So the North Vietnamese Army, or the NVA, is going to start sticking to the guerrilla warfare style, and that's going to make it almost impossible for the United States to actually win this war. And that's seen by some people in America at this time. They see we'd have to conquer all of Vietnam in order to win this, and it's very difficult to do this if this guerrilla warfare style stays intact. The jungle fighting specifically minimizes the effectiveness of U.S. superiority. We have all these bombs. We've got napalm. We've got Agent Orange. We've got the best trained soldiers, the best weapons. Doesn't matter if everyone is hard to find. If you can't find your enemy, it doesn't matter if you have all this stuff. And specifically, the Vietnamese are going to use a series of tunnels, like shown in the picture here, where it's almost like a whole village underneath there. All right. So if all this is underneath the ground, the bombing and the napalm is going to do nothing. So it's very difficult to actually get any progress accomplished on the United States side. This is going to really draw out the war, which is a goal of the North. The North wants to make this. The North doesn't have to. They don't have to win. They just have to not lose, right? So similar with our own independence, we didn't have to completely. We had to draw out the process to beat the British, right? So the North knows that they don't have to conquer everything. Eventually, Americans are going to get tired of fighting this, and that's exactly what happens. And because of the jungle fighting and the guerrilla warfare, it's going to push us to eventually leave. Now, Tet Offensive, beginning on January 31st, 1968, which is the holiday of Tet, or the Vietnamese New Year. On that day, the Viet Cong and NVA attack every major city in the South Vietnam simultaneously. It's a highly coordinated, very well carried out attack. And it takes almost a whole month for the United States forces to regain all control of the territories that were attacked. It's seen as a turning point. So even though the United States is able to regain everything, the American public sees, wow, we were surprised at how effective this attack was. They could pull this off. But also our belief that we can win this war is starting to diminish. There's no way we can win this if we're not even making ground. We're in fact losing ground to these soldiers that aren't seen to be on the same level as the United States. So the Tet Offensive, absolutely the turning point. And then kind of the media representation is also going to play a part in this too. So because this is going to be the first war that really gets televised. There's a famous quote that the Vietnam War was fought in the living rooms of Americans, because by this point in the war, Americans were already becoming disgruntled with the war, and we're starting to see that it's a lot more difficult, and it's not exactly a noble cause like we were fighting in World War II. So people are going to start to want to look for a way out. Eventually, the war is going to wind down. The 1968 election, the Vietnam War is a central aspect. Lyndon Johnson actually does not run for re-election. He doesn't think he's going to win, and he doesn't want to be a loser. So he says, I'm sitting this one out. Hubert H. Humphrey is going to run instead. Humphrey was his vice president at the time. Humphrey promises to kind of follow with his similar policy, the domino theory. If Vietnam falls, who knows what's coming next? Containment, all those things that we've talked about. Now he's going to be running against this guy named Richard Nixon, who's going to be elected and wins on the promise of law and order at home and win peace with honor in Vietnam. So he's talking about eventually getting out of Vietnam. He's not saying let's get out of here as soon as we can, but he's promising we will get out of there eventually. And eventually he does. So he comes up with the idea of Vietnamization, which is pulling American troops out while training the South to take over the fighting. They need to be able to fight this on their own. That's a popular opinion of America at that time. 5 years later, by 1973, the United States has pulled out of Vietnam, and the end comes 2 years later. Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, falls to the North, and that's all she wrote. Vietnam, to this day, is still a communist nation. They have a little bit of a hybrid market where they are communist, but there is private ownership of land, and there is kind of private ownership of businesses and stuff, but there is still a communist-like party, and there's only one political party in the nation. So that's going to wrap it up today. There is a brief assessment. Make sure you get that done on Google Classroom. This is also our last episode of the season. Here's the credits. All right, obviously I did the research in narration and video. The opening anthem is from a fantastic Argentinian chorus, so it's a very own custom song, Rule Gibsonia. So look for that on the charts. Let me know if you need any help with any of this. Email me directly. Come see me at the office hours between 12:30 and 1. Other than that, it's been an honor, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Stay tuned for the final assessment and test. Other than that, have a great day.